Today, we'll pull back the curtain on the venture world with none other than Brandon from Battery Ventures. We'll dissect the concept of moats and whether they're the castles of protection in the AI space or just relics. Do AI companies really have defensive walls? We think they do. As we cruise through the Horseless Carriage era of AI product design, Brandon's insights promise to reveal the innovations that could catapult us to the next era of customer-centric AI. Then we pivot to the debate of our time. Copilot AI versus full automation. How do we strike the balance between enhancing human capabilities and handing over the reins to AI? But it's not just about full broad strokes. We'll navigate throughout the nuanced alleyways of niche use cases versus the massive horizontal opportunities. Gleklen Nation, I'm your host, Thomas Joshi. Today, my fellow interviewer is Stephen Campbell, co-founder of Revamp AI, a Y Combinator-backed data analytics and e-commerce company. This is your portal to the minds crafting the future. We look at the what of AI, but the why and how it's transforming our world. Let's dive in. All right, Collective Nation, please join me in welcoming Brandon from Battery Ventures. For the audience's benefit, a little bit about Brandon. He is a principal at Battery Ventures. Battery Ventures is, one of the world's preeminent venture capital firms in the world. Started as a VC in the 1980s when VC was a sort of a nascent industry, and its portfolio has grown. And many of the market-leading software companies that you'll recognize that I worked with, at BAML and the Technology Investment Banking Group, from Cohesity, a sort of a data management, data storage company, Dataiku, assistant data science platform, Workato, workflow automation tool, Envision. And then Brandon has also worked with the market-leading AI companies of our day, from Seek AI, Customer AI, which you'll recognize for the acquisition that Facebook did with Customer AI and Level AI. So Brandon, would love to have you tell us about your prior work experiences, but really focusing on why you chose those positions, what you're most proud of, and how that led to your current work.
For sure. And thank you guys for having me. It's awesome to be on here. I think for venture, people come at it from a lot of different perspectives. At Battery, we have people who previously started companies, people worked in banking or consulting and corporate development and product roles. My background is very straightforward. I graduated from college in 2015. I started at Battery in 2015, and here I still am. So I'm going on year 9 now. So in some ways, the path was very straightforward and made a lot of sense. For me, given all those different paths I talked about, sometimes I like to think about, what would I have been doing had I not gone into venture? Like what path would I have gone down? And for me, I was always excited about being at startups, working at startups, starting a company. I was very involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem at Penn, where I was an undergrad. I thought I was just going to go do that. Venture has become much more industrialized, I guess I would say, in the last 8 years. But when I was looking at venture capital, nobody really knew what that was. There were maybe a couple firms that had analyst programs, but compared to what it looks like now, it wasn't nearly the industry that it seems like it's grown into now. And so I was interested in maybe working at a startup, but then I kind of learned about what this thing, venture capital was. There were people on campus who were starting companies, starting to talk to VCs. Fred Wilson, came to speak on campus, which was amazing. I got to learn from him. Like, this would be kind of fun and interesting. And so I ended up working in venture capital for a summer. Was lucky enough to get that role. Actually, at Bessemer, I was working in Israel at Bessemer for 10 weeks and had just an incredible experience there. And sort of caught the venture bug. And then I got started at Battery, and 8.5 years later, here I am.
A lot of people don't go directly from undergrad to venture, right? So a lot of people do my path to go to, maybe they have an engineering background, then they go into a tech banking role, or they go into, as you say, maybe they join a startup and then they go into VC. What convinced you, or what gave you the conviction that you wanted to go directly to that path as opposed to maybe trying it out for yourself in a startup role? Could you talk a bit more about that? Because a lot of our listeners are they're also maybe early on in their career, and they're thinking about, are they really more of an investor and they're more about the analysis, or are they more builders and they want to build a product?
Yeah, so it's a classic debate, right? The operational background versus the career investing background. one thing I would say, I think the industry is much better off having that diversity of backgrounds, right? If you think about our investment committee meetings or our meetings here at Battery, I think if everybody at Battery had the exact same background that I had, our conversations would probably be a lot less dynamic. I think we'd be a lot worse at making investment decisions. So I think it's amazing when people have the backgrounds of starting a company or having worked in big tech or right. Everybody's life experiences, I think, contribute to how they are as an investor, and I think it's a beautiful thing. For me, I think the thing that I really loved and enjoyed about it, and I got this experience when I was interning in Israel, is just the energy every day that you find from people. You spend your days talking to people who have this vision of a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company that currently doesn't exist. It's maybe it's a few people, or it's a small team with maybe no revenue or barely any revenue, and they're risking their careers or risking their livelihoods. They might have families, but like this is the thing that they want to build and needs to exist in the world, and they know there's a massive opportunity. You spend like all day feeding off that energy. It's really fun. I definitely feel like I've the best job in the world. And to get to spend time day in, day out doing that's really great. I will caution that I give this advice to people who are in college and considering the various different paths. I think starting a company or working in product, say, and working in venture are very different, right? In venture we don't build anything, right? We don't ship product. We don't get feedback from customers. I like to say, hopefully, I've been doing this for a while. Hopefully, I'm doing a good job, but companies take a long time to exit, right? The best companies take a very long time to exit, and so really, you don't know. And right, compared to people who maybe they're in consulting and they're getting weekly feedback, or if you're shipping product, right, you're constantly getting customer feedback. The feedback cycles are long, and you're not building anything. You're kind of just you're thinking, I guess, if you want to talk about building versus thinking. And I think that can be a real challenge for folks. Sometimes I joke there can be more similarities with like being a lawyer versus being in like product. I say that like kind of self-effacingly, but I think they are in many ways like very different roles. But I think there's also a lot of benefits to having a long career and a lot of experience in venture. I can run the numbers on this. Well, let's say like on average, maybe I talk to like 10 new companies a week, right? So that's let's say, with vacations or whatever, like, let's say I talk to like 500 companies a year. I guess it's probably somewhere between like 500, 600. 8.5 years in, I'm probably coming up on, I'll probably be 1,000 companies that I've talked to, at some point soon. And if you want to think about, well, how do you identify a great entrepreneur? How do you identify a great operator? How do you know what like great looks like? I don't think there's actually a substitute from just having a lot of experiences talking with folks, working with companies. And so I feel really blessed actually for my background and the perspective that allows me. But I also think, it should be a diverse industry where people come from a bunch of different perspectives.
With that, Steve, would love for you to kick us off with the icebreaker.
Yeah, definitely. So Brandon, one of our like hallmark aspects of any of our Gen AI collective events is our discussion groups, and all of our discussion groups always start out with an icebreaker. And this is, this started in, our first living room discussion events in my old apartment that Thomas was a part of, and had some really good times there. But we also have scaled this up to our multi-100 person summits. We still have icebreakers and discussion groups. So I'm really curious for your icebreaker answer. Our question is, if you could teach a course on any of your side hobbies or interests, so not work related, what would it be, and how would you structure the curriculum?
So if I was to teach something, I would do it on comedy writing, which is something that's played a big role in my life. Back when I was at Penn in undergrad, I was part of this group called the Mask and Wig Club, which was like a musical comedy group. So in the fall, we would do kind of a sketch comedy show, kind of feels like SNL. And then in the spring, we would write like a full book, like musical comedy, like the kind of thing that you would see on Broadway. I spent a lot of time with these folks. I spent a lot of time in writers' rooms. Some of the best memories of my life. Just working with folks on the craft of like, how do you write a great joke? And yeah, it was really rewarding. The spring shows we would go, I think it was like 25 show runs. We would tour internationally. And so that experience of just, writing jokes, writing scenes, and that process. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from it. I would point to maybe like two things where, if you're thinking about picking up comedy writing as a hobby, maybe you think it could be fun for you to do. One is I think like in this industry, like a sense of humor is really underrated. In boardrooms, obviously like a lot of conversations we have are very serious. I mean, particularly over the last couple of years, right? Just with how things have trended in the market. There are a lot of things that are like no laughing matter. But I do think people can be overly serious. I think people can take themselves too seriously. And having a sense of tools and techniques for just easing tension and kind of breaking a challenging conversation in a thoughtful way. I think a sense of humor in like an investor that I love to work with, or a CEO that I love to back, I think is really underrated. I also think there's a lot of parallels between comedy writing and product building. And the thing I would say about that is, what makes a great comedy writer? You might think it's just like a natural skill that some people have, right? You can probably think of people in your life that are just like very funny. You think they'd be great at they could be like on SNL or be great at writing. There's some people that are like that, right? Steve Jobs is like amazing at product or something like that. But really the process of comedy writing is the process of iteration. It's coming up with an idea. It's not going to be good. It's not going to work. The first time you presented it, nobody's going to laugh. But you got to figure out, well, is this a good thing to keep iterating on? Right? For our scripts, we would do them in Google Docs, and we'd hand them off to people, and people would do rewrites, and you'd have 5 or 6 iterations of rewrites. The quality of our show was directly correlated with the amount of times that we just went back to the drawing board and tried something again, and then it's the experience of actually bringing a product to market. Right? In products, you have things that are great in a test environment, but once you push it to prod, things break. Same thing in comedy, right? There's things that look great on a piece of paper, but the second you say it out loud, the timing doesn't work. The second you put on costumes and add in lights and props, things break apart and don't work. So it's this constant iteration process of changing things around to try to, at the end of the day, elicit a reaction that's just natural for people, right? People aren't trying to laugh when they're at a comedy show. You're trying to get that out of people, and that process and working with people and the humility to know, hey, this was my baby. I really like this idea, but now it's not working. It broke when we pushed it to the stage, basically. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I really loved it and enjoyed it.
I loved your answer, Brandon. I think that's one of my favorite ones I've heard to that Icebreaker. I think your parallels to entrepreneurship and building product are fantastic. And then also I totally agree with comedy's place kind of in VC. I think I've done a number of pitches. I don't really know how many. I think we've pitched Revamp probably 50 or 60 times. And the pitches we did where you could kind of establish a rapport early on, and maybe the VC tells a joke or you tell a joke or whatever, but just anything to lighten the mood in these kind of overly serious situations like a startup pitch, I think is crucial. So I totally agree with you on all points there. I really like that answer.
Great. So, Brandon, now that we've kind of dived into your background, gotten to know you a little bit, let's offer some value to the listeners, and let's dive into the AI industry. So, first of all, how significant is the concept of a moat in safeguarding a company's competitive edge? So, considering the multifaceted nature of differentiation, you can have partnerships, or you can have scalability. You see, in the oil industry, or the power of branding you see in consumer goods. Is the VC investment community perhaps excessively emphasizing engineering moats because of our roots into software engineering, electrical engineering? Or is there other types of moats that we're not looking at because we haven't seen those moats in the technology industry like we've seen it in other industries?
Yeah, so the concepts of moats within AI, I very much think this is one of the areas where investors are just really overthinking it. It's you have a paradigm shift, you have a new technology come out, and all of a sudden everybody wants to put on their MBA hat and think of all these concepts and say companies are only worth investing in if they have clear and definable moats. I would say let's just compare it to cloud companies, right? I think at the end of the day, AI companies, if you're building a B2B AI application, cloud is the right paradigm to think about. And do cloud companies have moats? Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, right? If you in a Peter Thielian sense, right? If you look at 0 to 1, the moats that he defines, a proprietary technology edge. where the technology you have is 10x better than the next person's company. If you're a 20-person business, perhaps maybe you came out of academic research, you have some proprietary technology that you patented. I think that in the cloud, it's less likely that that's the case. Let's talk about your branding. Well, if you're a 20-person company, you don't have a brand. Nike has a brand, that ends up being a moat for Nike, but I don't think that's as applicable here. Network effects. People love talking about network effects for businesses, right? With every incremental user, the software becomes that much more valuable to everyone else. Social networks get to benefit from that. A lot of consumer companies benefit from network effects. I would argue for the vast majority of cloud companies, network effects are either non-existent, or if they exist, they're very weak. And then there's the last one, which is economies of scale. And this is the one that I would actually argue that cloud companies have. I think all cloud companies have economies of scale, and I think AI companies also have economies of scale. And what is the economy of scale, right? It's if you think about it maybe in a traditional sense, it's it's building a factory, right? You mentioned like oil, right, as an example, like canonical businesses that have true economies of scale, right? You create more manufacturing facilities, more plants, and you're able to benefit from synergies. For cloud companies, the economy of scale that you have is your accumulated product insight and knowledge from building over time. This connects actually back to that comedy example, right? When you're doing writing a comedy script, nobody ever gets it right first, ever. It never happens. Similarly, for a product, nobody ever actually gets it right off the bat. One of my favorite pastimes is looking back at our old deal memos and taking a look at like the screenshots of products and like what the companies did. It's really funny to go back 10 years and see just like how different a company is today versus where it used to be. And that's because it's really hard from just like first principles, even if you've been deep in an industry for 10, 20 years, to come up with like the perfect product roadmap from day one. It doesn't happen. But you build something, you get feedback from users, you use that to impact your product roadmap, what you want to build, and then over time, like that becomes an accumulating advantage for a business. A tech giant can throw the same amount of R&D dollars at a problem. I can throw 10x the R&D dollars at a problem that a startup has. But what they don't have is that accumulating knowledge of just people being in the product. Like that ends up being the moat for cloud businesses. And I think the same thing is true for AI. So for companies that are kind of derided as being wrappers on top of OpenAI, or this is really weak. Oh, I bet you a bunch of companies can do this. I think that's true of basically every software company. When they're 20 people, it's probably true of every software company when they're 100 people. But if they're able to take in user feedback, iterate on product, build new features, build what customers want, like eventually this like thin wrapper becomes I think a pretty in-depth software platform. So I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking at your idea and you're like, oh, maybe it's just like a thin wrapper, or like VCs keep telling me like they can't invest because of it's going to be too competitive or this sort of thing. I would just say just go build, just go start building. And in fact, the sooner you start building, the sooner you can start accumulating this advantage and get out ahead of a market. That's why I think there's a first mover advantage in software. So yeah, moats, very overrated.
I think, first of all, your point on getting customer feedback. Obviously, ideas that have been popularized by Lean Startup and Steve Blank, but it's actually still pretty amazing how engineers still hold on to like, okay, but let me just build for 2 months and let me just please, like I want to build something really nicely and then get to market, when maybe like a Google form will do, where you just ask people, hey, would you be interested in this? Like, you're putting up a landing page. And so, different ways of getting feedback very quickly to slowly develop what that moat might look like. And then two, the idea of, you never get it right on the first try. I mean, I think some of the best stories on this are from like Instagram's early days, where you have Kevin Systrom, who's basically has like a product background, is building, he calls Instagram Bourbon, the Bourbon app, and he's trying to copy a lot of the social, so what was big in the time was like social, mobile, local, and he's kind of just figuring his way out, and it's through these multiple iterations that what like a couple person team sells for billions of dollars. So Obviously that's an example where things really go right when you iterate to the correct answer. But the idea of kind of getting product in the hands of your customers, and now you can look back and say, oh, Instagram obviously has Moats because of this social network effect that wouldn't have existed in the beginning days. And so I agree with you on that point. And I would say to add to your point, Moats such as you have proprietary algorithms, exclusive data, cutting edge research algorithms. Those I think are so crucial for staying ahead. But it is a question of could someone else also engineer a way to scale? So for example, Google in the early days, I would say the PageRank algorithm is not a mind-blowing algorithm. Like Steve and I could program it. You could do it right now.
I think you could, Thomas. I don't know about me. You're giving me too much credit.
But then what Google did is they hired the smartest people at Stanford on distributed systems, and they stacked like 10 different distributed systems innovations within the span of 5 years. That once they had accumulated, no one could compete with them after that point. And so those algorithmic advantages can also be stacked up in a rapid manner, such that you achieve scale that no one else can achieve. But moving on, would love to kind of get your thoughts on AI product design, because I think we've had 20 years of software system and product design, and we've had people build their careers on that. But what will this next generation of product leaders, how will they kind of think about the way they design products? Because if you consider the early automobiles, those were initially conceptualized horseless carriages, right? So reflecting limited thinking based on previous technology. And how might AI product design be similarly constrained by the innovations we've had in the past in software, so this deterministic, Web 2.0 world, versus the innovations that will kind of break that mold that we have now?
Yeah, so I love that analogy of the horseless carriage, and I absolutely think that we're in that era for current AI products. Really, many of the AI products that we look at are some version of like a co-pilot or a chatbot. It's some kind of like textual-based interface where you're kind of going back and forth and using that to inform your work. It is a little bit of a throwback, right? If you think about when I started my career, 2016, 2017 era, like chatbots were all the rage. Like this was like the big investable category. So there's a lesson in there about how things always seem to circle back a bit. But yeah, I mean, you look at the horseless carriage, right? That was, when the automobile technology came out, like that was the first product conception that everyone had. Like, oh, amazing, we don't need horses anymore. Let's just build a horseless carriage. And you go back to now, right? You've got McLarens, you've got Toyota Priuses, you've got Ford F-150s. Like the idea of what like a car or what an automobile can look like is just totally different. And so I think the way that if you look at this AI wave, like the way that intelligence seeps into our workflows, I think we'll just end up looking very different, and it's not all going to look like a chatbot interface. The example I like to use is Salesforce. I joked today that like Salesforce actually has two UIs. There's two UIs for Salesforce. The first UI for Salesforce is the Salesforce app that you go into, understand how companies are progressing through the funnel, or log tasks, log activities from reports. So that that's the first UI for Salesforce. The second UI for Salesforce is the person who logs into Salesforce. It is the manager who doesn't, Salesforce is a little complicated. They don't feel like going in, learning all the tips and tricks. They just want to go talk to somebody on my team. Hey, when's the last time we talked to that opportunity? Or hey, like what are our how's our pipeline looking for next quarter? Anybody in this state I'm going to go be in. Right? They don't. The more natural user interface is something that is a human. Like that is the interface that they like. And so I think a lot of AI opportunities, like they either feel like chatbots or they kind of feel like software applications. My guess is, let's do this in 2034. We can replay this and then talk about how AI applications, or I'm even calling them AI applications, AI experiences, intelligence seeping into workflows. Like let's see how that looks. My guess is it looks very foreign to kind of primarily the experiences that are being created today.
And I think when you go back and you watch videos of like 1980s, 1990s, you have like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates talking about the next generation of apps. They talk about the internet, and they talk about these things that we just take for granted. You wouldn't say it's www.amazon.com. You just say it's Amazon. You stop thinking about the abstractions around Amazon or the abstractions around using Microsoft and thinking about the underlying layers that support that. You just think about what it means to you in the application layer. And so I think if we put a framework of using Jeffrey Moore's very famous book, Crossing the Chasm on Technology Adoption Lifecycle, that suggests that AI is possibly in the early adoption phase. Okay, so it's constrained by appealing to a lot of tech enthusiasts. It's now kind of been adopted by many people through OpenAI, but I would say that in terms of people who really use it day to day in their workflow, it's a lot of tech enthusiasts. And so the next leap in AI could involve designing those products that address broader market needs and practical applications. So you think about this as you mentioned, 0 to 1. Teal talks about might argue for creating something new rather than iterating on what might exist in the past. So this incremental improvement of AI. So right now we're in the phase where we're really focused on how do we scale models up? How do we throw more compute? Because we've learned that deep learning, pretty much no matter what you do, you'll get increased performance by using deep learning. And so now we're seeing a lot of work out of MIT, Stanford, Google, and all the big tech companies on what's the next paradigm shift. So instead of just adding incremental compute, how can we train models even faster? How can we use quantum computing methodologies and create what might be, you mentioned in the future, we might look back on this and saying like, this is really sort of primitive technologies. And there was actually another paradigm shift that we were going to hit later on into the future. And so totally agree with you there. Steve would also love for you to ask the next question here.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this kind of flows nicely. This is something my co-founder and I definitely talk about a lot. And it's the idea of, co-pilot versus full automation for a given use case. Definitely curious how you view this from an investment angle. I mean, kind of same problem, two different startups solving it, one solving it via co-pilot. So like AI assisting humans in tasks, more enhancing human capabilities versus, maybe startup B and they're solving the same problem, but it's through full automation, AI systems independently performing tasks really without much human intervention. And there's kind of three use cases I think of that are kind of just like baselines here. You have like IBM Watson Health, right? That's like, a co-pilot, for healthcare fields. That's more like assisting. On the other end of things, you have something like a manufacturing facility, right? Where, the most high-tech cutting edge manufacturing facilities like Tesla, that's, much more of an autonomous system, very little human intervention. So curious, how you judge a startup or judge its merits in solving a problem based on the co-pilot versus full automation.
Yeah, so I do think it ends up being like very use case dependent. There are certain use cases where 100% or X nines of accuracy is really important, and if it doesn't get there, it just won't be used. What's a good example there? We got a company, CKI, in our portfolio that helps less technical people get better answers from data more quickly. So let's say you're a customer success rep, you're about to go into a meeting where you're meeting with one of your accounts. You just launched a new feature in the last month. You want to know, how many people are using it, how often are they using it, and I want to have these stats like on my hand so I can talk about it on this meeting. And they were trialing it, and I want them to upsell. So there's revenue attached to this. You don't want to get that wrong, right? If you can go to a person on your data team and get 100% right answer, or at least the data team member approved answer, like switching to some system that maybe it hallucinates something, or right, these models are non-deterministic, right? If it gives you something and you only trust it, it's only right 70% of the time, 80%, even 95% of the time, it probably isn't good enough, right? You'll just default to your old way of doing things. And so, I would say for Seek, you probably want to have some sort of product design that solves for this, right? Where there's a failover or an opportunity for the AI to learn from humans and not just be a pure, just total automation layer all the time. But then I think there are other opportunities where it could make a lot more sense, right? I think classic examples would be in design ideation, for example, right? Getting 70% of the way there is great, and you don't need a human in the loop maybe to create the very roughest of prototypes of the design of an app. You probably just have a fully automated system that you enter in a spec for what you're looking for, and it spits something out, and and then you just you push it into your favorite design tool or whatever, you go from there. But there's no there's no kind of natural sort of like co-pilot or kind of human assisted part of like that exact application experience. The thing that's also tricky is it's going to change, right? We're GPT, or you've got GPT-4 now, right? It is the best model. Sounds like, for OpenAI, it's kind of mostly trained and developed like a year and a half ago, right? I think we're all excited about, what will happen like in the next year. The tricky thing for me, both as an investor, but I also think for founders is, right, we're making investment decisions over a 7 to 10 year time horizon. Right, the best companies we invest in, we might be on the board or be working with them for 15 years plus. And so what do capabilities look like from here to then? Right, think about what smartphone capabilities look back in 2010 compared to where they are now. If you're building and designing an app, like how do you get comfort? Right, the thing that you need human assist on today, maybe 6 months from now you won't need human assist on because it whatever GPT 5, 6, 7 and beyond, right, just gets that level of capability. And so I think what's incumbent on people is, whatever modality you choose today, full automation versus Copilot, whatever fits your use case, you're probably gonna have to iterate, right? You're probably gonna have to, stay up to date on what the latest and greatest is, and kind of move as new capabilities develop. But yeah, it's tricky. It's very tricky.
Definitely. I'm curious in terms of like founder mindsets when it kind of comes to this problem. What kind of attitude are you looking for? Is it one kind of open-mindedness, or because definitely I know conviction in founders can be a positive signal, right? Depending on the question. So I'm curious, are you looking for more like open-minded founders when it comes to Copilot or fully automated, or do you want more of like conviction on like this is how we solve this problem, or do you think it's more of a case-by-case basis?
For me, I'll always go to open-mindedness being key. The phrase people use is strong opinions weakly held, right? You certainly have to have a sense of what you're building, right? If you're quitting a great high-paying job to go start a company, my sense is you've got conviction on the thing is to go be built. You're not just doing this for fun because entrepreneurship sounds fun, right? You've probably got some picture of what the future looks like. But I think people who are overly dogmatic about, this is how the future will look, I will build it and they will come, and they don't take in that feedback, they're really missing out, especially because, what I was saying earlier, like that is the one moat in your business. The fact that you have feedback and other people don't, right? If you're not using that and taking advantage of it, right, that I would say that there's no moats. You're just yet another person who had an idea about the future, and you're trying to bring it about. So, right, companies change, ideas change, products change, things that were, sort of bedrock in your ideology, they move over time. I think we're looking for people who do a good job of just like taking in suggestions from different people and dealing with that well. You absolutely can go too far the other direction. For founders, especially when they're dealing with VCs, like I would highly recommend, if you're doing a 30-minute pitch meeting with an investor, and this is something you spend like your life on, years of your life on, and somebody's gotten to know the product for 30 minutes, if they give you some strong advice on minute 25 on, hey, this will never work, you got to change this, like why doesn't your product work this way, like this, why aren't you going after this market, I would not fully update your priors on that basis, right? And I think you can go that direction, right? Some people I think can be too easily swayed, so you've got to find that right balance of and I think that mantra of strong opinions weakly held, like I think that's the right way to go about it.
Awesome.
So would love to shift focus in terms of like, let's say I'm one of your I'm a portfolio company, early stage, come to you for advice, and I've got some good traction in a particular application, maybe a particular vertical market. And I can't wrap my head around whether I want to go to more horizontal and build a product like a more like a infrastructure software company like a Redis and a HashiCorp and a Confluent, and just focus on multiple industries versus maybe just drill in on this particular vertical or application. So you have a lot of horizontal portfolio companies like Cohesity and Dataiku, Workato. You have some more, I would say, like verticalized companies like Customer AI is a little bit more. It's kind of focused on customer support, more application layer. Maybe I'd
characterize that. But something that kind of dogs me is like, do I want to focus on a particular vertical? Like, I've been a machine learning engineer for healthcare applications, for financial applications, but also, with Stanford DSP, more at the horizontal layer, so it can be used across different industries. Like, if I'm a startup founder, I'm coming to you on like, kind of, do you have any thoughts for me on whether I should go more sort of verticalize and focus on a particular end customer, or more horizontal? Like, how do you kind of frame that conversation? Because in the AI industry, like, how do we decide between dedicating resources to perfecting technology for a unique niche application versus expanding that across a large scale of opportunities, which might expand my TAM and the number of customers that can go after, but might water down the quality of the offering?
So the answer is definitely both. I think there's a lot of large horizontal opportunities where there will be very large outcomes. I think there might be 20, 30 amazing teams that all raise 50 million plus to go after those outcomes, but we never knock anybody for ambition. I mean, that we're in that business too, right? Of hopefully working and finding and investing in the best companies. So absolutely, those opportunities are out there. Like, I'll give you a specific example. Really straightforward application that I believe will like turn into a public company is like the company librarian, right? The knowledge management of an entire company, right? The one AI that you can talk to know, hey, who knows about X? Like, what's the latest on Y? Like, there will be a company that manages that and does that people use, and like that will emerge as a big, large, important software category that every company will need. Like, I would love to use that at Battery. We're certainly talking to companies that are doing that, and I would love to go invest in that company. I think that's an amazing idea. Just large, horizontal, clearly, public company, scale outcome potentially. But I'm also very interested in what you could describe as like these like vertical niche opportunities. You bring up the question of TAM, like, well, if you go too niche, is the market size not there, right? Maybe it's not worth time, or investors won't get excited. I'd say big learning for me in my career with the companies that I work with is that labor automation opportunities are shockingly large. So any company, right? This is what AI is all about, right? At the end of the day, is you're bringing intelligence to bear on a problem that previously you would have needed to have humans working on. When you can automate labor, the size of your TAM is much bigger than you would think. Right? Think of a software application and another software application. Let's say they're both modern cloud apps, and you want to like look at their TAM and look at how they are, how they compete with each other. It's really hard for one cloud app to be 10x better than another cloud app. It does happen, these things do exist, but you're actually to be like intellectually honest with yourself and like go through the number of examples, the number of times in history where a cloud native company has taken on another cloud native company and beaten them and fully captured that market. Actually, not that many, right? Go look at the big public companies today. Look at when they were founded. Look at who their competition was, for the most part, right? So there's a lot of on-prem to cloud transition. Cloud versus cloud, like there's a lot less there. And I would like argue like the market size for like the incremental cloud app, if you're going to be really fair, right? Not spreadsheet math on TAM, but like actually what is the true market opportunity? That's one thing. But when you're going after labor, there's an opportunity to have 10x, 100x, 1000x productivity versus what you'd be paying for. So I'll give a hypothetical example. This isn't a company in our portfolio. If you're building it, like come chat with me because I'm really interested. It's actually I can try to send this to you guys later, but it's inspired by some research I saw out of Stanford. But the company, the hypothetical company is Lobby GPT, and this is basically it's like an AI application for lobbyists. So like let's say you're a lobbyist at a company. This sounds pretty niche, right? Like how many lobbyists are there? I don't know, but one could certainly imagine an application that's keeping track of all the pending legislation in the U.S. and globally, and does that impact your company or not? Do you want to draft a letter to your representative talking about this proposed legislation? Here's how it would impact me, right? You probably think of like a lot of the tasks that a lobbyist do. Certainly not all of them, right? There's a lot of stakeholder management. There's a lot of people interaction, right? That AI is certainly not probably automating today, but a lot of like the menial reading through proposed legislation, trying to keep track of stuff. Does something apply to me or not? Certainly, one could imagine an AI application driving significant opportunity and significant labor automation. And so maybe if you're a lobbying team of 20 people, can you get rid of 2 people, 5 people, 10 people, right, who are engaged in those sorts of tasks? And my guess is even just as a standalone company, Could that get to $1 billion in revenue? I don't know. Could it get to 50 million or 100 million? I think probably if you did the napkin math. And could you start with that, get to 50 million in your first act, and then you find some adjacency, and then you go after that, right? You'll get ServiceTitan in our portfolio, right? Software for plumbers is how they started. Now that they nailed that market, and then now they're going after more kind of software for home services, much more broader market. They expanded their TAM over time. Great companies end up finding TAM in all sorts of places. But I still think even that core labor automation opportunity, right? Think about how they pay a lobbyist at a big company, how much money that person really makes. Like, there's probably, how much can you charge that? Probably like a decent amount. And this is like, I think it's just an interesting idea of just like a niche. And it's probably gonna be a lot less competitive in the big horizontal categories. If you start building that today, you'd probably be able to start, accumulating those product insights that allow you to build like a moat and a better user experience over time. So, for founders, if you're thinking about ideas, the big ideas are awesome. They're ambitious and they're amazing. And trust me, we want to go invest in all those companies. But I wouldn't discount like some of these things that seem niche-y, because if you're automating labor, it probably isn't actually niche-y. It probably is like a much bigger opportunity than would maybe appear at first blush.
And I think some of the innovations from the large public data analytics companies from C3, Alteryx is now is going to be bought out, but you have Domo. I think they either already are like more. So I think they could be categorized as AI companies, more like data analytics. But a lot of them already are or will move into workflow automation, workflow analytics for people who are not engineering focused, because the vast majority of the workforce is not an engineer and someone who needs to make sense of data in a simplistic way. So, numerous case studies of at least the larger players and a lot of companies being started in that area. And then two, this idea of verticalized AI. My sense is that it was more important, at least when I started, than it is now, because when I was starting in ML, I think a lot of people were, the big thing was to take an open source model and fine tune it. Whereas now I think most people, they are using a GPT-4, ping the API, and then maybe they use, maybe they use a tool like DSP or LangChain to do retrieval augmentation on that, retrieval augmentation generation. And so you may not need a fine-tuned model because it's already read, most of the internet. The language model is already sort of based on the internet, and so that's one. I think it's not as important as it used to be to make verticalized AI applications. And then two, this idea of expanding the moat. So C3.ai started basically all of their revenues are coming from the oil industry. The major partner was kind of Baker Hughes, and then they slowly built their way out of that sort of niche into other markets, and you see a lot of companies do that. And I think it's because the idea is that eventually you will saturate the current opportunity you're in, and so you'll inevitably have to go into new markets. You might as well, do that. Focus on your core customer segment, and then do that later. As you kind of as the opportunity set kind of goes away, it's like why break what's already working is one way to think about it.
And so for vertical applications too, like let's take lessons from cloud, right? Why isn't Salesforce the CRM for everybody? Like why do vertical CRMs exist?
Yes.
You can talk about product reasons, but there's also just go-to-market reasons, right?
Yes, exactly.
They show up at the right conferences. When I call the customer service rep, do they, let's say I'm a dentist, I'm on a dental CRM. When I call up my rep, like, are they a former dentist? Do they understand me, my problems? Like, is the taxonomy, like the way that the app is organized, is that correct? My guess, maybe like somebody could try to make a horizontal solution work for their vertical, for their niche, and maybe so there's the product differentiation, but there's also just like the fact of like, where are you showing up? How does your customer service work? Like, how are you prioritizing roadmap, right? You're laser focused on a certain use case versus others. Like, there's a lot of reasons why vertical software has become, the category it is. And it's vast, right? Like, I think the same way that if I was to say, there's no more vertical software opportunities, let's go back to like the dawn of the cloud. Like, let's talk about like 2013, 2014 period. Like that would have been an insane thing to say, right? There's all the low-hanging fruit are already picked, right? There was another 10 plus, right? I think it's still a great time to invest in vertical cloud companies. In AI today, we're like year one of like what ended up being a vertical cloud revolution. We're in year one of like what will end up being a long vertical AI revolution. So there's plenty of these opportunities and like things to go pick off and things to go do that I think are just very clear opportunities by focusing in and tying both product development, but also in a very key way, like go-to-market support, right? All targeted at a specific vertical. Like I think very clearly I could just go spend the next 10 years only doing vertical AI investing, the same way somebody in 2013 could have said, I'm just going to do vertical software investing for the 10 years and like truly beyond, right? There's tons of opportunity out there.
And also, to add to your point, is that I think that idea of focusing on horizontals was an idea initiated at the start of sort of the .com bubble, when the opportunity sets weren't as big as they are now, where a lot of companies have adopted digital automation, digital workflows. And so you look at any measure of digital adoption, it has exploded in the past decade. And so I think a lot of the frameworks that we've had in the past don't as hold true as now, where you can just focus on one vertical and the opportunity set has grown exponentially over the past couple of years. Would love to dive into your background, or maybe some of your thoughts on healthcare AI. You're invested in Redox, led by Luke Bonnet, and I have some background as an ML engineer at a close venture-backed company in AI and healthcare. So, what are the profound implications of AI systems, maybe in the overall healthcare system, so data management systems, in patient? Maybe you want to talk about patient diagnosis. Maybe there's a lot of work in digital automation, digital workflows for doctors. Happy to kind of take it wherever you'd like, but just curious to get your thoughts on healthcare and AI.
Yeah, so we were talking vertical AI opportunities, and so we'll like which verticals should you pick? I think there's a lot of great ones, but we can talk about healthcare. And the word I would use, and that I throw around the office a lot, is elegance. Like, is this new technology, is this new capability, does it elegantly apply to problems, right? There's no shortage of boardrooms, all over the country, all over the world, where they're like thinking through their AI strategy and how can like AI apply to one business. And there is like some square peg round hole, right? That just happens, right? When you're just trying to make something, a new capability comes out, you want to make it fit. The thing that's amazing from the work that we've done in healthcare is again like the elegance of the ways that these new technologies apply to various problems. I think the problem within healthcare that it is most elegantly applied to, at least the one that we've explored the most to date, has been just around administrative burden, right? All of the dollars that go into various kind of back office proceedings that happen within health systems. So I can talk about a few. One that I think is really relatable for all of us because we experience it is just around medical scribe. And taking notes right during sessions. We've all had this experience, right? Of you go to the doctor's office, the doctor's not making eye contact with you. They're filling out their systems like while they're talking to you. It's you hope that they're paying attention and listening to all the things, but like, you can't even make eye contact. It's not great. It's not ideal. Absolutely, one could certainly imagine the role of AI in listening to a conversation between a doctor and a patient, taking notes, structuring those notes into systems, kicking off various administrative workflows, whether that's prior authorization processes, right? The process that needs to occur between a doctor and your insurer to say, this is a procedure, this is a drug that's going to be medically necessary. The coding of things that are happening in the clinic, right? So somebody does a certain task that has to turn into a medical code. How do you generate that code? These codes can be very complex. People can spend hours on these, like the tones, like it's one of those things you could like throw down that stack of paper on the desk and it would shake, right? Just the amount of codes that people have to dig through in order to find the right ones. Even from the consumer side, right? I went to the doctor yesterday, and I'm trying to remember everything that we talked about, but would I have loved to get like a summary and be able to listen to it? And right, if for folks that maybe have parents who are elderly, like, wouldn't you love to be able to hear what actually the doctor said and the real name of that medicine or that condition that you've never heard in the English language before? Like, it's elegant, right? One can certainly see, you look at everything that OpenAI has done with Whisper, and even just generally the big tech companies with what they've done in terms of speech to text, like clearly like this isn't going to be how it's going to happen in the future. And I think there will be a big company in that area. I think medical coding is an exciting use case, and prior authorization, that process I described. I think all of those, maybe they all end up condensing into one company, maybe they all end up being separate workflows, but this is probably the area that I'm spending half of my time in right now, because I clearly think there's something to be identified there.
Definitely. I think the problems are solved. I think from an engineering problem, like it's solvable problem. Problem I think in my eyes is distribution. So like knocking on doors, getting doctors to accept it, getting the right data security and privacy policies in place, selling that to doctors and large healthcare systems. And so, yeah, I think someone needs to crack that nut of like, it's not just the engineering problem, it's a distribution problem and partnerships problem.
Yeah.
Stevie Boyd, do you want
I would
to?
say that, like, I think currently right now, there's just like a massive technology overhang. Like so much has happened in the last couple of years that the market's still bringing in. Like when people say, oh, is AI a fad or like whatever, there's been all the various hype cycles that have happened. Like I would say, like let's put the technology in amber today. Let's say no further development happens. Purely with what we have today, we can create really compelling companies, really compelling experiences. We're all just so new, even in our understanding about how these technologies work, right? There's the phrase, right? People who spend 10,000 hours, right? And that's what gives you mastery. Like, how many people have spent 10,000 hours prompting? How many people have like spent 10,000 hours like building these products? Like, it's so early. And the opportunities I think are so clear. And that's one of the things that's really exciting. It's not, I talked about, what does GPT 5, 6, 7, 8 look like? But those will all come. But even without those, right? I think in healthcare, right? Clearly, like there's things to be done.
Yes. Stevie, you want to ask the last of our discussion questions before we do the closing question?
Yeah, definitely. So, Brendan, one topic that keeps coming up in our discussion events is this idea of the risks of anthropomorphizing, AI, right? Like there's no I in ChatGPT. Although GPT can mimic human-like responses, it completely lacks self-awareness, consciousness, and personal experiences, maybe what we would describe to, personal identity. So I'm kind of curious from like an investor's perspective, how are you weighing the risks of anthropomorphizing AI when it comes to investments? I think there's definitely problems with like investing in healthcare AI, right? Like, you don't want to give users the overestimation of its abilities just because it's acting kind of in a human-like way. What's your take on that? How are you kind of mitigating risk when it comes to that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple kind of, I think, key perspectives here. One, I think, is just generally in like the market's understanding of like this technology and what it is. Right? We don't experience the GPT-4 base model, right? We experience, for the most part, the common consumer, right? ChatGPT, something that's been, RLHF'd and is trained to be like a helpful assistant and is kind of prompted in that way. And when you just scroll Twitter, right, you see, ChatGPT said this about X, or ChatGPT said, they wrote, this much about this thing and only this much about something else, and like what's going on? Like ChatGPT is like, I think people kind of refer to it as if it's like a human, but when really it's not, right? It's a I think you can think of it as like a computer, right? And you prompt a computer a certain way, and if you were to change your prompt and adjust your prompt, like your output would change. I think it's also my sense. Just I'm still working on my 10,000 hours of prompting, but I'm trying to get there. But my goal is hopefully I can be the investor that's done the most prompting. Like whenever somebody talks to me, hopefully I've done more prompting than all the other investors. I think that would make me a better investor. But I think its ability to pick up on like little nuances, even ones that you might not even think, right? When you're writing something or asking it a certain question, it's trying to learn like who you are. It's trying to learn like what answer would be most helpful for you. Like that's the way that it right. And so I think there's a lot of things just in the ways of engaging with the application. Like we can think about it as peer. We don't want to think about it as a person. The other thing too is just one of the my favorite pieces of writing that I encourage like everybody to go read. This is on Less Wrong. This guy Janice, or guy girl, actually wrote an anonymous figure, Janice, who wrote a piece called Simulators, and it talked about the ways that LLMs, the way that foundation models, even the perspective of like agentic AI, which is all the way range. I'm really excited about it. I think reducing LLMs to agentic experiences, I think, will power like really exciting, important products, and we're excited to invest in a lot of agent companies. But Janice makes the argument that actually it's better to think about LLMs as really as a computer and really like as a simulator, as opposed to as an agent. And simulators like aren't you don't anthropomorphize like a simulator, right? If you're playing a video game, you would anthropomorphize a character. You wouldn't anthropomorphize like the gaming engine. Really, it's much more of a gaming engine than it is like a gaming character. And so I think it's just like public, their understanding of these technologies, that they're not humans, that they're computers. And the impacts that we have probably on how we think about certain aspects of AI safety and things like that. Like, I think there's just like a public education piece on like what this technology actually is one thing. And then I think it also is a product design. Like, I think if we view LLMs as purely being agentic or purely being like people, we would design certain experiences that maybe don't fully encapsulate like all the value that we could potentially drive. So kind of like a pet issue, but I feel like it's I think the point's important.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I'm excited to see how this plays out. I really like your idea of thinking of ChatGPT and similar LLM functionality as like a game engine. I might co-opt that and start using that myself, because I think that's a great way of contextualizing it.
And it's not an exaggeration, because so our paper, the Stanford DSP paper, was accepted in NeurIPS, and at NeurIPS, everyone is talking about, particularly in our language model section of the world, everyone was talking about how we need to start treating language models as computers. In that, for our system, we have one of the reasons that we've kind of been popularized in the language model ecosystem is because we have a lot of work in retrieval models, and you can think of a retrieval model as taking data out of your putting data into memory. Taking it from kind of your slow storage into your hot storage for quick retrieval, and then you can think about as internet enabling that, and in that computer, which is akin to an agent who can scrape the internet and read sources on the data, read other sources. And so this idea of a language model and a language model system as a computer is not an over-exaggeration, that Brandon, that you're making. And we're going to see parallels in the next 5 years, and companies built on this idea. So love that you brought that idea up. So that kind of concludes our discussion portion. I want to just wrap up with a final question, which is, what is the AI industry going to look like in 1 year? And so Jeff Bezos has his quote about, don't ask what will change, ask what will remain the same. And that's one of the ways you can kind of build your business. So, what is true now? If you don't feel comfortable in saying like what exactly it'll look like what is true now that you think might hold, or what kind of key things interacting will develop into new development in a year from now? But curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say, right? Things are moving so quickly. Maybe I'll give a preview of like some capabilities that I'm really excited about that I think we might see by the end of the year. One is the ability to just have a really strong low latency voice-to-voice conversation with AI. I think that unlocks a lot of like really exciting use cases. Right, latency I think is still an issue to date. It's getting a lot better, right? I encourage people, if you got a Chat GPT app on your phone, to engage in like the back and forth like conversation with it. But I think like those capabilities will continue to get better, and just the ability for an AI to compellingly join your Zoom call, or for you to talk to it on the phone as you're heading home and wanting to make a restaurant reservation for you or something. Like, you can probably imagine a lot of use cases that just like that reduction in latency and the ability to have like those voice-to-voice conversations. So that's a capability I'm excited about. I think we'll see AI embedded into more experiences. Like, I think seeing where the foundation models go is really exciting. I'm hopeful that the ability for foundation models and to create experiences that are better at doing things like planning and executing tasks at higher precision right after that. I think that'll happen. But I'm equally excited about what we're seeing with people taking open source models like GPT 3.5 quality models, and putting that into like increasingly like less expensive hardware. Right, you don't even need an internet connection. I downloaded an app on my phone where I just pulled down Mixtral. I just have it on my phone now. And when I'm on a plane, like I can talk to it. Right, and I think I joke, like one of my 2024 predictions is AI powered action figures. Right, you'll being able to have like an action figure that a kid can use, and when you're using your imagination and coming up with things that the action figure could do, you could talk to it, and it could talk back to you. Like, I think we'll just see AI in more places, and it'll go from something that purely is needs an internet connection or needs server support, to something that can kind of exist everywhere. Like, I'm really excited about that as a theme. So yeah, I think those are the two main things I would lay out. I think voice to voice by the end of the year, I think is going to be really strong. And then I think this like AI everywhere concept, which I think will be powered more so by open source. I think you'll see a lot of really compelling experiences by the end of the year coming out of that.
Got it. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from what you said for me is, internet has permeated everything we do. Everything is internet enabled, and I think the same will happen. It already has happened with Google search and Amazon search and a lot of these suggestions that we have, but it will be more generative in nature, conversational in nature, and it'll pervade everything we do. The question then becomes, will people get tired of a conversational search, as it is a bit more involved than just typing a query into a Google search bar? But thank you for this parting thoughts there. And everyone, that's our interview with Brandon from Battery Ventures. Collective Nation, as we wrap up another episode of the podcast, I want to express my gratitude and to you, the curious and passionate listener. Today's discussion has once again illuminated this terrain of AI, offering us rare glimpses into the mind shaping the field. So as always, we're building this podcast with the Gen AI Collective. Please let us know if you have any questions or feedback. If you'd like to be a guest on the Collective Intelligence podcast, please get in touch with us. Details for doing so will be in the show notes or YouTube description. And if you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a review or comment on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.